The autumn leaves scattered across Main Street as Owen Mitchell stepped out of the sleek black sedan, his Italian leather shoes crunching against the gravel. 12 years had passed since he'd last stood on this corner in Willowbrook, and yet everything looked remarkably the same. The old clock tower still chimed on the hour, slightly off-key. The maple trees still lined the streets like ancient guardians. But Owen himself had changed beyond recognition. Humble beginnings. Owen ran his hand through his now styled hair, remembering when it had been perpetually messy, unable to afford a proper haircut. Back then, he'd been the invisible man, the janitor at Willowbrook Public Library, mopping floors and emptying trash cans while dreams of something greater burned quietly in his heart. He'd lived in a cramped studio apartment above the hardware store, surviving on instant noodles and library books about computer programming. The townspeople had barely noticed him. To them, he was just the kid who'd lost his parents in a car accident at 16, the one who dropped out of community college because he couldn't afford tuition, the one who seemed destined for an ordinary, unremarkable life. Only two people had seen something different in him. Mr. Theodore Hartwell, the elderly librarian who'd let Owen use the computers after hours to teach himself coding. And Ruby Davenport, the girl with chestnut hair and hazel eyes who treated him like he mattered. Walking down memory lane, Owen dismissed his driver, preferring to walk through town alone. His hand-tailored suit felt out of place here, where flannel and denim were the uniform of choice. He'd built Mitchell Technologies from nothing, starting with a simple app he'd coded in the library's basement, growing it into a multi-billion-dollar empire that revolutionized cloud computing. Forbes had called him the genius who came from nowhere. If only they knew the truth. He passed the old diner where he'd sometimes splurge on coffee, making a single cup last for hours while he sketched ideas on napkins. The hardware store where his apartment had been now sold artisanal soaps and candles, gentrification reaching even Willowbrook, apparently. The bookstore on Elm Street. Then he saw it. Nestled between the pharmacy and the bakery stood Davenport's Books, the store that Ruby's grandmother had founded 60 years ago. The paint was peeling slightly, and the wooden sign needed refinishing, but the window display was charming, a carefully arranged collection of autumn-themed books surrounded by real leaves and tiny pumpkins. Owen's heart hammered in his chest. He'd thought about Ruby countless times over the years, wondering what became of the girl who'd sat with him in the library during his lunch breaks, sharing her sandwich because she'd noticed he often skipped meals. The girl who'd believed in him when he'd stammered out his wild dreams of creating something important. He tried to find her online several times but had stopped himself. What would he say? How could he explain why he'd left without saying goodbye? The bell above the door. Taking a deep breath, Owen pushed open the bookstore door. A small brass bell chimed overhead, the sound instantly transporting him back in time. The scent hit him immediately: old paper, coffee, and something floral. Lavender, maybe. The store was cozy, packed with floor-to-ceiling shelves that created intimate little reading nooks. A tabby cat dozed on the windowsill. Soft jazz played from speakers somewhere in the back. "I'll be right with you," a voice called from behind a stack of boxes. Owen froze. That voice. Older, perhaps a bit tired, but unmistakably Ruby. She emerged carrying a box of books, wearing jeans and an oversized cardigan, her chestnut hair pulled back in a messy bun. At 32, she was even more beautiful than he remembered: laugh lines around her eyes, a dusting of freckles across her nose, an air of quiet strength. The moment of recognition. Ruby looked up, and their eyes met. Owen waited for recognition to dawn, for her to gasp his name, but instead she simply smiled politely, the professional smile of a shopkeeper greeting a customer. "Welcome to Davenport's. Can I help you find something?" She didn't recognize him. Of course she didn't. The scrawny janitor with the second-hand clothes and beaten-down posture had been replaced by a man in a $3,000 suit, standing 6 feet tall with the confidence of someone who'd conquered the business world. "Just browsing," Owen managed, his carefully cultivated business voice sounding foreign in this place. "Take your time," Ruby said, setting down her box. "We've got everything from classics to new releases. And the coffee corner in the back is help yourself. I just made a fresh pot." She returned to unpacking her box, shelving books with pretended to browse, stealing glances at her. She wore a simple silver bracelet on her wrist. He'd given her that bracelet for her 18th birthday, just before everything fell apart. Shadows of the past. Owen's fingers traced the spines of books in the fiction section, his mind reeling. He'd prepared himself for many scenarios, but not this. Not Ruby failing to recognize him. Not the strange sensation of being invisible to her all over again. A small boy, perhaps 8 or 9, bounded into the store, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Aunt Ruby. Can we go to the park? Mom says it's okay if you're not too busy." "Give me 10 minutes, Finn," Ruby called back, ruffling the boy's hair as he zoomed past toward the children's section. Aunt Ruby. So she wasn't married, or at least didn't have children of her own. Owen shouldn't have felt relieved, but he did. "Looking for anything in particular?" Ruby asked, suddenly beside him. Up close, he could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the worry lines on her forehead. Life hadn't been completely kind to her either. "Actually," Owen said carefully, "I'm looking for a book I read a long time ago. It was about second chances. About people who thought they'd lost everything finding their way back." Ruby's expression softened. "I love those kinds of stories. Do you remember the title?" "No," Owen admitted. "But I remember the feeling it gave me. Hope, I suppose." The crack in the facade. Something flickered in Ruby's eyes, a moment of uncertainty, as if somewhere deep down, something familiar tugged at her memory. "Well," she said slowly, "I might have just the thing. There's this wonderful novel about a man who reinvents himself after losing everything, and years later, he returns to find that what he'd been searching for had been waiting all along." She led him to a shelf near the window, pulled out a worn paperback, and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed, and Owen felt that same electric jolt he'd felt at 17. Ruby gasped softly, pulling her hand back. She stared at him, really looked at him this time, her eyes widening. "Owen," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Owen Mitchell?" He smiled, that same crooked smile from their youth, the one thing that money and success hadn't changed. "Hello, Ruby. It's been a while." The book fell from her hands, landing with a soft thud on the hardwood floor. Neither of them moved to pick it up. 12 years of absence hung between them like morning fog, slowly beginning to clear. Ruby's hand flew to her mouth, tears instantly pooling in her hazel eyes. For a moment, she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The polished businessman before her and the gangly janitor from her memories refused to align in her mind. "I don't, how, you look so different," she stammered, taking a step backward and bumping into the bookshelf behind her. Owen steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. 12 years of decent meals and a good barber will do that," he said softly, attempting humor to ease the tension, but Ruby wasn't smiling. Her expression cycled through shock, confusion, and then something harder, anger. "You left," she said, her voice gaining strength. "You left without saying goodbye. Without a letter, a phone call, nothing. I thought something terrible had happened to you. I filed a missing person report, Owen. Did you know that?" The guilt that had haunted him for over a decade crashed over Owen like a wave. "Ruby, Aunt Ruby." Finn appeared from the children's section, clutching a book about robots. He looked between them, sensing the tension. "Are you okay?" Ruby quickly wiped her eyes, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, honey. Actually, could you do me a favor? Run next door to the bakery and get us some of those chocolate croissants Mrs. Patterson made this morning. Here." She pressed a $20 bill into his hand. Finn glanced suspiciously at Owen but took the money and left, the bell chiming his exit. The truth unfolds the moment the door closed. Ruby turned back to Owen, arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes to explain before I throw you out of my store." Owen had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times, but now, facing her, all his prepared words evaporated. "I left because I had to," he began. "That last night, at the library, do you remember?" Ruby's expression softened slightly. Of course I remember. It was right after Mr. Hartwell's funeral. You were devastated. He left me something, Owen said. $5,000 and a letter telling me to chase my dreams, to not let Willowbrook become my prison like it had been his. But there was more to it. He paused, the old shame rising. Your father found out about us. About how I felt about you. Ruby's eyes widened. My father? What did he came to see me at the library. Told me I was delusional if I thought someone like you would ever seriously consider someone like me. That I was an embarrassment, dragging you down. Owen's jaw tightened. He offered me $10,000 to leave town and never contact you again. Buried pain resurfaces, the color drained from Ruby's face. He didn't. My father wouldn't, but even as she protested, Owen could see the doubt in her eyes. Robert Davenport had been a proud man, obsessed with status and appearances. I didn't take his money, Owen continued. But he was right about one thing. I had nothing to offer you. I was barely surviving, Ruby. So I took Mr. Hartwell's gift and bought a bus ticket to Seattle. I figured if I could make something of myself, maybe someday I could come back and face you. But years passed, and the longer I stayed away, the harder it became to reach out. Ruby sank into the reading chair by the window, processing this revelation. My father died 3 years ago, she said quietly. He had a stroke. Near the end, when he couldn't really speak anymore, he kept trying to tell me something. Kept getting agitated. I thought it was just the illness. Owen knelt beside her chair. I'm sorry. I should have told you. Should have said goodbye. It was cowardly. Yes, Ruby agreed, but her voice had lost its sharp edge. It was. She looked at him, really studied him. Mitchell Technologies. That's you? The Owen Mitchell who invented the cloud stream platform? He nodded. I read about you in the paper last year, she said wonderingly. They said you were worth $3 billion. I saw your picture and thought there was something familiar about you, but the name threw me off. In school, you always said your last name was Price. The full story, Price was my mother's maiden name. I used it in school because my father's reputation. Owen trailed off. Thomas Mitchell had been the town drunk, a fact Owen had tried desperately to escape. When I started my company, I decided to reclaim the Mitchell name. Make it mean something different. Ruby reached out and touched his face, her fingers trembling. You really did it. Everything you used to talk about during those lunch breaks. You made it all real. Not everything, Owen said, catching her hand. I made money. Built a company. But I left behind the only person who ever truly mattered. The air between them crackled with unspoken words and years of missed opportunities. Present dangers. The bell chimed again, but it wasn't Finn returning. A tall man in an expensive coat entered, his expression souring when he saw Owen and Ruby's proximity. Ruby, darling, the man said, his voice dripping with false warmth. I hope I'm not interrupting. Ruby stood quickly, pulling her hand from Owen's. Jasper. I wasn't expecting you today. Jasper Cromwell. Owen recognized the name from the business briefing his assistant had prepared about Willowbrook. Cromwell Development Corporation had been buying up properties along Main Street. I was in the neighborhood, Jasper said, his eyes fixed on Owen with thinly veiled hostility. Thought I'd check in on your decision. The offer expires Friday, you know. What offer? Owen asked, standing. Jasper's smile didn't reach his eyes. And you are? An old friend, Ruby interjected quickly. Jasper, this isn't a good time. I'm offering to buy this building, Jasper said, addressing Owen while watching Ruby. Very generous price, too. Ruby's grandmother would be proud to see the property finally reach its full potential. The battle lines form. Owen felt his business instincts kick in. What's the offer? Owen, please, Ruby said. This isn't your concern. $200,000, Jasper announced. For the building and the business. Ruby could retire early, travel, maybe finally write that novel she's always talking about. Owen did quick mental calculations. The building alone was worth at least $400,000, given Main Street's recent appreciation. The business, with its loyal customer base and prime location, added significant value. That's highway robbery, Owen said bluntly. Jasper's pleasant facade cracked. Excuse me? The property's worth double that, minimum. If you're going to make an offer, at least make it honest. Owen. Ruby hissed, but Jasper had already sized Owen up, noting the expensive suit, the confident stance. And what exactly is your stake in this, Mr. Mitchell? Owen Mitchell. Owen extended his hand, watching with satisfaction as recognition dawned on Jasper's face. The tech billionaire? Jasper's handshake became considerably firmer. I didn't realize you had connections to Willowbrook. Born and raised, Owen said pleasantly. Just came back to visit old friends and explore investment opportunities. Ruby's bookstore, for instance, fascinating business model. Independent bookstores are having quite a renaissance, you know. Turning the tide. Jasper's expression darkened. Ruby and I have been discussing this for months. I'm sure she's explained the financial difficulties. I haven't agreed to anything, Ruby interrupted, finding her voice. And I've told you repeatedly, Jasper, I'm not interested in selling. My grandmother built this store. It's been in my family for 3 generations. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills, darling, Jasper said, his tone patronizing. You're 3 months behind on property taxes. The roof needs replacing. That furnace won't make it through another winter. Ruby's cheeks flushed with embarrassment and anger. Get out. Ruby, be reasonable. She asked you to leave, Owen said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge. I suggest you respect that. The two men stared at each other, and for a moment, Owen thought Jasper might challenge him. But Jasper was a businessman, and businessmen knew when they were outmatched. We'll talk later, Ruby, Jasper said, heading for the door. When you're thinking more clearly. He paused at the threshold. Mr. Mitchell, I hope you know what you're getting involved in. After he left, silence filled the bookstore. Pride and vulnerability. 3 months behind on property taxes? Owen asked gently. Ruby wouldn't meet his eyes. It's been a difficult year. People don't buy books like they used to. They download them to their tablets. And yes, the building needs repairs I can't afford. Her voice cracked. But it's all I have left of my grandmother. Of my family. I can't just let it go. You won't have to, Owen said. Ruby laughed bitterly. What, you're going to swoop in and save me? The poor little bookstore owner who can't manage her own business? That's not what I don't need your charity, Owen. I didn't need it 12 years ago, and I don't need it now. Before Owen could respond, Finn burst through the door, triumphantly holding a bag of croissants. Mrs. Patterson gave me extra because I helped her carry flour bags. Ruby plastered on a smile. That's wonderful, sweetie. Why don't you eat yours in the reading nook? I need to talk to my friend for a few more minutes. As Finn settled into the children's section, Ruby turned back to Owen, her expression guarded. I think you should go. Ruby. Please, Owen. This is too much. You can't just waltz back into town after 12 years and expect everything to be like it was. Owen knew she was right, but he also knew he couldn't walk away. Not again. Have dinner with me tonight, he said. At the Old Mill restaurant. 7 o'clock. Just dinner, as friends. Let me explain everything properly, and then, if you want me to leave Willowbrook and never come back, I will. Ruby hesitated, and in that hesitation, Owen saw hope. Just dinner, she finally agreed. But Owen? Don't try to fix my problems. I need to stand on my own 2 feet, even if I fall. Owen nodded, understanding more than she knew. See you at 7. As he left the bookstore, Owen pulled out his phone and made 3 calls. 1 to his personal lawyer. 1 to his accountant. And 1 to his head of real estate acquisition. Ruby wanted to stand on her own feet. Fine. But that didn't mean he couldn't make sure the ground beneath her was solid. The converted mill restaurant sat beside Willowbrook Creek, its water will still turning decoratively in the current. String lights created a canopy of stars above the outdoor patio where Owen had reserved the best table. He arrived early, nervous in a way no boardroom presentation had ever made him. Ruby appeared at exactly 7, wearing a simple navy dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. She'd left her hair down, and it caught the golden hour light like strands of amber. You remembered, she said, gesturing to the table by the water wheel. This was always my favorite spot. I remember everything about you, Ruby, Owen said, pulling out her chair. Over appetizers, they talked carefully, dancing around the deeper issues. Ruby told him about taking over the bookstore after her grandmother's death, about Finn, her sister's son whom she'd been helping raise since her sister's deployment overseas. Owen shared edited versions of his journey from Seattle to Silicon Valley, the struggles and breakthroughs that had built his empire. You always said you'd change the world, Ruby mused, swirling her wine. Looks like you actually did it. Changed the tech industry, maybe, Owen corrected. But the world? That requires something. Welcome home, he echoed, finally understanding what the words really meant. Around them, Willowbrook glowed with life and possibility. The bookstore's lights were still on, Ruby had hired 2 part-time employees, and business was booming. The old mill restaurant had expanded. Main Street was thriving with preserved historic buildings housing new businesses. And at the edge of town, the Mitchell Technologies facility stood as proof that you could leave and come back, that success didn't mean abandoning your roots. Finn ran past them chasing fireflies, his laughter pure and joyful. In the distance, someone started singing, an old Willowbrook folk song about coming home. Others joined in, voices blending in imperfect harmony. Owen pulled Ruby closer, breathing in the scent of her lavender perfume mixed with the evening air. He'd left as nobody, returned as somebody, and discovered that the labels didn't matter. What mattered was this moment, this place, this woman who'd waited for him without even knowing she was waiting. I love you, he whispered against her hair. I love you too, Ruby whispered back. Always have. Always will. And under the stars of Willowbrook, surrounded by a community they'd helped save and a future they'd build together, Owen Mitchell finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Not success. Not recognition. Not revenge against those who doubted him. But belonging. Purpose. Love. Home. The real conversation. As their main courses arrived, Ruby set down her fork and looked at him directly. Why did you really come back, Owen? And don't say it was just to visit. You could have done that any time in the past 12 years. Owen had promised himself honesty. Mr. Hartwell died 6 months ago. Ruby's hand flew to her chest. What? But I thought, you said he died 12 years ago. That was his brother, Theodore. The librarian. But his twin brother, Bernard Hartwell, stayed in Willowbrook. He was the one who convinced me to take Theodore's money and leave, said it's what his brother would have wanted. We kept in touch all these years. He was like a grandfather to me. Ruby's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know Bernard had a twin. He never talked about family. Bernard made me promise something before he died, Owen continued. He made me promise to come back, to face my past, to stop running. He said the things we run from always catch up eventually, and it's better to meet them on your own terms. Is that all I am? Ruby asked quietly. Something you needed to face? No, Owen said fiercely. You're the only real thing in my life, Ruby. Everything else, the money, the company, the success, it all feels hollow because I built it on a foundation of regret. Regret for leaving you. Regret for not fighting for what we had. The community responds. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from inside the restaurant. Through the windows, they could see people gathering around the bar television, their expressions alarmed. Owen and Ruby went inside to investigate. The local news was reporting that Cromwell Development had purchased the entire west block of Main Street, every building except Ruby's bookstore. The reporter stood in front of the pharmacy, explaining that Cromwell planned to demolish the historic buildings to make way for a luxury shopping complex. This can't be legal, someone in the crowd protested. Those buildings are over 100 years old. The restaurant owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, shook her head sadly. Cromwell's been working the town council for months. Got the permits approved last week. Only thing standing in his way now is Davenport's books. All eyes turned to Ruby. Is it true? Someone asked. Are you selling to him? No, Ruby said firmly. I'm not selling. Relief rippled through the crowd, but Mrs. Chen looked worried. Then he'll find another way, dear. Men like Jasper Cromwell don't take no for an answer. The plan takes shape. Back at their table, Owen's phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer. He read it, then smiled grimly. What? Ruby asked. Cromwell used shell companies to buy those properties, Owen explained. Paid 30% below market value because the owners didn't realize they were all selling to the same buyer. Classic predatory development tactic. So what can we do? Owen looked at her carefully. I can stop him. But it means getting involved in Willowbrook's business in a big way. It means I can't just visit and leave. Are you okay with that? Ruby considered this. What exactly do you have in mind? Over the next hour, Owen outlined his plan. He'd establish a community development fund, buy back the properties Cromwell had purchased, his lawyers had found loopholes in the contracts, and work with the original owners to renovate and preserve the historic buildings. Mitchell Technologies would open a small satellite office in Willowbrook, bringing jobs and money into the local economy. And my bookstore? Ruby asked. Stays exactly as it is, Owen said. Except I'd like to fund the repairs and cover your back taxes. Not as charity, he added quickly, seeing her expression. As an investment. You'd pay me back with a percentage of profits over time, standard business arrangement. Owen, I can't. Yes, you can, he interrupted gently. Ruby, you're not asking for a handout. I'm offering a partnership. Your bookstore is the heart of this community. Save it, and you save Main Street. Confrontation and resolution. The next morning, Jasper Cromwell stormed into Ruby's bookstore, his face red with fury. You brought in Mitchell. You actually called in a billionaire to fight me? Owen emerged from the back room, where he'd been helping Ruby inventory new shipments. She didn't call me. I came of my own accord. This is a private conversation, Jasper snapped. Not anymore, Ruby said, standing beside Owen. My answer is final, Jasper. I'm not selling. And thanks to Owen's community fund, neither are the other property owners. Your development project is dead. Jasper's expression turned ugly. You think you're special because some rich boy came back for you? He'll get bored and leave again, Ruby. And when he does, you'll be right back where you started, broke. Actually, Owen said calmly, I'm moving my company's research and development division here. Just signed a 5-year lease on the old textile factory building. We'll be bringing about 200 jobs to Willowbrook. I'd say I'm pretty committed. This was news even to Ruby, who stared at Owen in shock. Jasper looked between them, realizing he'd lost. You'll regret this, he said, but the threat was empty. He left, the bell chiming cheerfully at his exit. Speaking from the heart. 200 jobs? Ruby said once they were alone. Owen, you can't restructure your entire company just to. I'm not, Owen assured her. I've been looking to decentralize for months. Silicon Valley is overcrowded and overpriced. Willowbrook has good infrastructure, available workforce, and quality of life my employees are desperate for. It's a sound business decision. That also happens to keep you close to me, Ruby observed. That also happens to keep me close to you, Owen agreed. Ruby, I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I hurt you by leaving. But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Ruby walked to the window, watching Main Street slowly wake up. The pharmacy owner was sweeping his sidewalk. Mrs. Chen was opening her restaurant. Mr. Patterson was arranging fresh bread in his bakery window. Her community. Her home. I spent years angry at you, she said softly. Then I spent years trying to forget you. But the truth is, Owen, I never stopped loving you. Even when I was engaged to Tom, even when I thought I'd moved on, there was always a part of my heart that belonged to that gangly janitor who dreamed impossible dreams. Owen moved behind her, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Tell me those dreams aren't impossible anymore. Tell me we get a second chance. Ruby turned, looking up at him. I'm scared. What if you leave again? What if the novelty of small-town life wears off and you realize you don't actually fit here anymore? Then you'll have to remind me why I fell in love with this place, Owen said. Why I fell in love with you. As many times as it takes. New beginnings. 6 months later, Owen stood at the podium in the renovated town hall, addressing a packed crowd. Mitchell Technologies' new facility was opening next week, and the celebration had brought together everyone in Willowbrook. When I left this town 12 years ago, Owen began, I thought success meant escaping your past. Building something so big and impressive that no one would remember where you came from. But real success isn't about running away. It's about bringing everything you've learned back home and building something that lifts everyone up. The crowd applauded, but Owen's eyes were only on Ruby, sitting in the front row between Finn and her sister, who'd recently returned from deployment. After the speeches, Owen found Ruby in the newly renovated community library, the building where he'd once worked as a janitor, now state-of-the-art thanks to Mitchell Technologies funding. Mr. Hartwell would be proud, Ruby said, running her hand along the polished wooden shelves. Both of them. I hope so, Owen said. I'm dedicating the tech center in their names. The Hartwell Brothers Innovation Lab. Ruby smiled. Perfect. She pulled him toward the back staircase, the one that led to the basement where he'd coded his first programs. Come on, I want to show you something. In the basement, now transformed into a bright co-working space for local entrepreneurs, Ruby had hung a framed photograph. It showed a young Owen, skinny and awkward in his janitor's uniform, standing beside Ruby outside the library. Neither of them was looking at the camera, they were looking at each other, laughing about something long forgotten. Where did you find this? Owen asked, his voice tight with emotion. Your old boss, Mrs. Ashford. She kept it all these years. Said she always knew you'd do something special. Ruby leaned her head on his shoulder. She was right. Full circle. That evening, Owen and Ruby sat on the park bench where they'd shared their first kiss 17 years earlier. The town spring festival was in full swing around them, music, laughter, children playing, the community alive and thriving. I never asked, Ruby said suddenly. In all those interviews where they asked about your success, what did you tell them? What was the secret? Owen thought about all the rehearsed answers he'd given over the years. Hard work. Innovation. Timing. But sitting here with Ruby, in the town that had shaped him, he knew the real answer. I told them I was chasing something I'd lost, he said. It took me 12 years to realize that what I was chasing wasn't money or success or validation. It was this. Home. You. The feeling that I belonged somewhere. Ruby kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. Welcome home, Owen Mitchell.